Hey everyone, this is Don McDavis. I own D2 Leatherwork, and right now we're down at Tandy Leather. So whenever I transfer the pattern onto the actual piece of paper that we're going to be drawing our pattern on, I go ahead first and then I measure far across this actual stitch line itself, and I draw that onto there. So then we go back in the second time with the tape measure, and you'll see I'll measure out, it's a 1/4 inch. So that way I know where to end my tooling at. If I were to go past that point, what will happen is I'll stitch over top of my floral, and it's just not something I particularly like. So right now I am just marking out my stitch line. Then after that is there, I will go 1/4 inch on my border. So I'm going to right now make a quick line just to kind of figure out where my stitching holes will be, so that when we're drawing on our border, basically around where the gusset's at, we can substitute in a border for that. So this first border I'm creating, I'm just mimicking the stitch line, so that way whenever we go to lay out the border, even though we're going to be making a 1/4 inch, on these parts right here, where there's a slight bow in the wallet. Also here, when we're going to sew the gusset in, I want to make sure we have that in the pattern. We're laying the border out, so that way if whenever we're going to tool, the tooling will not underlap the gusset itself. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to find the center, and so right now we're looking at, go from border to border. That seems to be 8 7/4. So we should be 4 I believe it was 3/8. The first line, these are actually 1/2 inch off the center. So this is going to be the top. It's going to separate our two sides of tooling. Whenever I'm doing my floral designs or wallets or stuff like that, I typically don't tend to put any floral or basket weave or any geometrics on the fold of a wallet. So whenever I'm laying a pattern out, I have those circle templates, and usually depending on the size or the shape of the piece, for this it was more of a square, so we ended up going with the basket weave on the other half. So looking at the circles that I had, I tried to find 2 circles that would fill in a lot of space, but at the same time they have a nice flow. So we did go to 3 1/4 inch for the actual floral layout, and then I believe we used the 1 3/4 inch for the flowers. So I'll take the first 2 circles, and then that's what I'll use to start my flow with. So what I'm doing now is, depending on what design you're doing, the shape or style of the project you're working on, I try to find which circle best suits for the project I'm using. So for this one, we're going for a bit of a larger layout. So I'm just gonna roughly sketch right here, this circle. And then we'll position this one as well. So right there you can see that we pretty much filled a good deal of this pattern. Yes, so right now I'm laying out my flow lines, and this is going to determine which way my pattern is going to flow. So the pattern is going to start here. The actual starting of the pattern is going to be hidden behind a flower. So I'm going to start here, come around this flower here. We're going to have a flower stem off on this pattern here, and then come up around and stem off to another flower in this circle. So now that we pretty much got our flow lines figured out, I'm gonna go through. So typically when I start drawing my flowers, as you'll see in the video, I like using the same circle template, and I'll take that circle and I'll center it into our flow circle, so that way you have a nice centered flower inside that floral. I typically start with drawing a small little dot in the center of the actual flower circle, and then I'll start building my leaves off of that. So I'll start going all the way around, just kind of that way it's nice and even. You don't have any petals a lot bigger than others. It's all really equal. After that's done, then I'll start adding my petals. And then after that, I'll just go back through and I'll erase what's left of that circle that we began with. Going back to our jumbo circle pattern, I'm going to go through and I'm going to envision how big I want my flower to look in the center of these swirls. So I'm going to probably pick, we'll say this one right here. This is a 3/4 inch circle. We started with a 3 1/4 circle. So 3 1/4 we used to lay out our flow lines. Now we're using that 3/4 inch circle to kind of give us a round shape to build our flower off of. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to center it the best I can in this flow circle. Whenever I'm working on a pattern, what I'll do is I'll start with long lines, and that two original circle lines we drew, what you want to do is you want to make sure your lines follow them. So as you go through your drawing, you're going to bring that back down close to that line. The next one you'll start, bring it close to that line, and all you're doing is just following them 2 flow lines to keep a nice, good flow going. So now the next step I take when doing my floral, after my flowers are drawn, now I'm drawing my stems coming up off of my flowers. Whenever you're drawing your stem, typically is thicker than most of your vines or your plugins. You want to stand out the most. So I go through, make it a nice size, make sure it's really stands out. Stems are what connects your flowers to your vine work. Anytime you have a flower and floral, typically you have a stem coming off to connect it into the pattern itself. So when I'm doing stems, a big thing you want to pay attention to is right here. So if you look closely, if I were to take this stem in here, if I were to have put that stem and started it back here, you wouldn't have had as much room to fill in your pattern with different plugins and vines. So if we had this right here, just got a quick little look, just a quick line. So you'd actually start your pattern, or your pattern would end back here. So instead of being able to wrap it all the way around your flower, you start it here. So pay attention whenever you're drawing your flow lines out. You want to have those stems pull around right to where that floral comes in the opposite side, so directly across from it. Same thing on this side. When we come back through, this pattern's coming up. We have that started on this side, right where that pattern is actually starting at. So that way we can make the most of our pattern and get the most floral and design out of it. So same thing on the inside. What I'll do is, for me personally, I like starting at the end of the pattern. So I'll come over here and same things we did on the outside. You're gonna start those lines and you're just gonna bring them in. Like I said, every time you make a line, you wanna make sure you're pulling it close to that actual flow line. If you don't, what's gonna happen, it's gonna get bulky. So just keep on going around using whatever type of plugins you like personally. I use a lot of vines in here. We have some turnbacks, but that's what we did all the way around. Just pulled them lines in and followed that flow line all the way on both on the insides. So my next step, I like to do to fill in some space is when I like to put in my leaves. So any big area where I feel like it's going to be, if I try to bring that floral around both of these sides, it might get too big and bulky. So typically this is where I'll just go ahead and add my leaves in. So I'm going to incorporate that, flow it in with a pattern. We will go ahead and throw a leaf in. So for me, I like to start at the end of the pattern. So when you look at a floral pattern, you have your end. This is kind of where you want to think of it coming up out of the ground. It's sprouting from the ground, and all this is coming up, all the vine work coming up through. So most people start back here. Just my preference, I like to start at the end of the pattern and work my way back. So I'm gonna start with some stems, or vines I should say. We're going to add some vines in here, and we're going to work our way back down the pattern. The actual flow line itself, I want to go back through and erase that. If you don't, you're going to have a line that goes from all the way from the start of your pattern to the end of it. So I'll go back through. The only thing we use in flow lines for is, like I said, when we're drawing, and you're keeping a nice circular shape going through there. So we're going to go back through with the eraser and just getting them excess lines cleaned off of there, so that when we go to carve it, we don't mistake it for an actual line. Whenever like I said, I start at technically the end of my pattern. So I'll work my way around with my stem, and then I'll actually start with my short lines here on this side, and work the longer ones down around. Making sure that every time you start the short line, and whenever you end with that long line, you want to make sure it always goes past that last long line. Let's raise that a little bit. We'll continue throwing some vines going around here. Go through here, clean this up a little bit. Then we go back through this pattern. We'll go back through and pull some of these lines back down a little bit. Keep in mind whenever you're laying this out, those original lines we made, those flow lines, you don't want to draw that flow line. Because if you draw that, you're going to have a line going from one end of the pattern all the way around to the other. So we're just using that to kind of keep our floral in a circle-ish manner. So we're going to go back through now that we got the start of that done. Go back through, kind of clean that up. We're going to pull these lines down a little bit farther. So I like to work from the insides to the outsides. So instead of coming back here to the outside of this pattern, I'm actually gonna come over here to the next circle and work on this flower, working on doing the inside of this. So same thing, we're gonna go ahead, start drawing some vines. Whenever you're drawing your lines out, you want to make sure, as we're going to this flow line, you want to pull these lines in towards that. You want to overlap to the next one, but you always want to pull that towards that line, because if you don't, what's going to happen, by the time you get around to here, you're going to have one giant thick mess of floral. So So it's very important to pull those lines in and bring them nice and close. One big thing that I would say is using or doing a lot of study on the flow of patterns, because that itself will determine the entire outcome of your product or whatever you're trying to actually draw. So if you look into it, just practice drawing circles. That's a big thing when it comes to these layouts, and steady, even lines. Just practice. That's a lot when it comes to drawing floral. So you want to make sure all these flow lines you want to erase out, because you don't want to transfer them and accidentally carve them out. That would not be good to have a random line floating in that pattern. So same thing, I'm going to go back here to start this stem right here. Just going to extend some of them lines out, like so. Pull them in a little bit closer to those other lines. Okay, at this point, we can go ahead and we can start drawing the outside lines. So, same thing, all we're gonna do go right through and just start adding some of our plugins and vines. It's right here, I'm just gonna go ahead, draw a nice vine there. The same thing, we're just gonna go ahead and work it around that pattern. So when it comes to drawing floral layouts and all of that stuff, if you're having a hard time just kind of comprehending what plugins are, different flowers, leaves, anything of that sort, it's really good to start off with books. I'd recommend going and getting Sheridan Style Carving. It's a great book. Start with the foundation of drawing floral in all that sense. So if you're having a tough time, definitely go check that out. It will help you out a lot. And then we can start back at the beginning. Kind of once again, just kind of pull those lines out just a little bit. It'll give it a nice look. Trying to fill in as much of this space in this floral as we can. So starting back on this side, start with the stem sorts. Same thing, we go in here, draw a stem. I'm going to pull this in here. Right down there. I'm just going to pop one on both sides of this leaf here. And that will complete that part of the pattern. So right here we have some empty space. So I'm actually going to pull this line back through here. Same thing, throwing a little bud right there. And we don't have too much room here, so I'm gonna just bring this line down. You wanna get close to that border because that's kind of why we drew it. So now, same thing. We're going to continue. Throw in some more vines on the back side. Work our way around the pattern. I do a lot of flip-flopping. And we'll throw one more vine in there. We will complete the pattern. So at this point, I just want to go over the entire pattern. Kind of just look at anything that might need to be sharpened up. Maybe to pull a line down here. Fill in some of that space. Connect any lines that you haven't before. And then we just kind of clean the pattern up. Any of those stray lines that really don't lead anywhere, clean those up. So that way we don't transfer them onto our transfer paper. And we could put the pattern to the leather. Right here, get that out of there, and we will go ahead and pull that out. There we have it, our completed pattern. Be sure to like and subscribe. You can find all the products that we use in this video in the link below. So I'm Don McDavis from D2 Leatherwork. Thank you for watching.